Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. My very dear students, learners, students, mentors, friends, teachers, and the regular viewers of my channel, and at the same time encouraging my efforts. Assalamu alaikum. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. I believe that we have been pursuing the project management lecture series, and this is, I think, the 18th lecture, which is again on a very important aspect of the projects, and that is conflict management. On the cover page of this presentation, you can see we have two pictures. One is the picture of the president in the 9th convocation of the Karakoram International University when he was at Gilgit last year on 3rd of July. And on the other picture on the right side, we have the International Conference on Ecotourism, Hospitality and Mountaineering, which was held in Hunza campus of Karakoram University on 28th through 30th June. So for almost 4 or 5 days, the Honorable President of Pakistan and the Chancellor of the Karakoram International University was with us, having different kind of activities at Gilgit-Baltistan. Thank you very much. I offer, as usual, my prayers from the recitation of the Holy Quran and the prayers. ربنا بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ربنا ظلمنا أنفسنا وإن لم تغفر لنا وترحمنا لنكونن من الخاسرين. Ameen. So we start with the lecture on the project conflict management, and in this presentation we will certainly discuss the basic definition of the conflicts and why the conflicts are very natural to come in the projects, and what are the different types of conflicts or modes of resolving the conflicts, and how does the project team leadership really wants to and tries to avoid the conflicts in the projects. Now, when we look at the our role as project manager, and particularly my role for a very long time as project manager, the very common conflicts which we have, first of all, within the organization, that is the inter-department conflicts. Normally we have the conflicts with the users, conflicts with the finance department about the availability of funds. We have conflicts with the human resource department about the availability of timely workforce. We have conflicts with the audit department regarding the payment to the contractor, and so on. Outside the organization, we have the most common conflicts with the contractors on the quality, on the cost, on the time overruns, and maybe in the scope change. We have conflicts with the sponsors in which sometimes the funding availability can be a problem. The timely release of the funds can be a problem, and so on. And then we can be conflict with external agencies in which they would like to monitor our projects and try to create some issues which ultimately impact the project's objectives. So the conflicts is one way or the other way is a kind of trade-off which the project managers are supposed to deal with throughout the uh, project management career. So as usually you would start from some quotations. Alfred Adler, it's easier to fight for one's principles than live up to them. A man will fight harder for his interests than for his rights. The man who fights for his fellow man is better man than the one who fights for himself. I never make the mistake of arguing with people for whose opinion I have no respect. Edward Gibbon, what counts is not necessarily the size of the dog in the fight, it is the size of the fight in the dog. So the spirit of the negotiation, the spirit of conflict resolution would really make a solution. Never enter into dispute or argument with another. I never yet saw an instance for one of the two disputants convincing the other by arguments. I have seen many on their getting warm, becoming rude, and shooting on the others. Thomas Jefferson. Truth springs from argument amongst friends. Start out with an ideal and end up with a deal. Let us never negotiate out of fear, but let us never fear to negotiate. Negotiation is the classic diplomatic sense, assumes parties more anxious to agree than to disagree. Negotiation means getting the best of your opponents. In a business, you don't get what you deserve, you get what you negotiate. During a negotiation, it would be wise not to take anything personally. If you leave personalities out of it, you will be able to see opportunities more objectively. Man is an animal that makes bargains. No other animal does this. No dog exchanges bone with another's. Adam Smith. The single biggest danger in negotiation is not failure, but to be successful without knowing why you are successful. So these are some of the very famous personalities who have their statements about the negotiation. Now, the conflicts is a situation of competition in which the parties are aware of the incompatibility of the potential future position, and in which each party wishes to occupy a position which is incompatible with the wishes of the others. Conflicts is viewed as a cycle, as with any social process, there are causes. Also, there is a core process which has results or effects. These effects feed back to the effect the causes. Conflict can be constructive and healthy for an organization. And we discussed last time that there can be even positive risk. So same is the case with the conflicts. It's not always the case that the conflicts would be a problem in the organization. Many times I have seen that the conflicts which are raised at the site and in the projects lead to success for both sides. So the conflicts is basically part of life. It's inevitable. It may be negative most of the time, and sometimes it may be positive. Now, disputing is an action verb, and conflicts are noun. Disputing is a problematic and involves the ways people deal with conflict, how it gets acted out. Now, the conflict is enhanced with many types of behaviors, like being made to look bad in public. So if you damage the image of someone, or if you try to damage the organization, definitely the conflict would start. It may be character or personality attacks. There might be some unfair practices. There may be lack of information, shame in blaming each other, subjective criticism, not being listened to, and threats. So these are some of the very common sources which lead to the creation or raising of the conflicts. The conflicts can be at the face, in the problems which need solutions, Ongoing conflicts, require open, honest communication, and ongoing conflicts that require interventions or mediations. Now, the helpful insight for the managing conflicts is acknowledgement, appreciation of differences, and a common ground or focus. The first thing is that you have to acknowledge that there is a conflict, and then you respect each other in terms of their differences of opinion. This is the right of human being to have their differences, and then you try to find a common ground to solve these differences and these conflicts. Now, these skills can be learned and practiced. For example, conflict management skills naturally would be learned is in when you are moving through different stages of your life. And I remember that if you just look at the last 10 years of my life, since I've done my PhD 11 years now, or 12 years now, I remember that there has been a lot of transition in my experience to avoid the conflicts and also to resolve the conflicts. Now, the very basic principle to avoid the conflicts is listening very carefully to the others. Listening actively is one of the ways to show unconditional positive regard for another person. Now, this is very common problem with all of us, that we don't carefully listen to other, and we most of the time avoid them, and this really creates many time an issue for us. So we have to be very carefully listening others in the conflicts. Now, the active listening would require minimal verbal responses. I mean, you should not try to to create rebuttal or deny or refuse. Rather, you should be more silent and more listening and using like, really, oh, great, oh, yes, wow, I see, tell me more. How can you tell me more? I'm really interested. So these kind of words would create careful listening instead of rebutting the statement. Asking the open-ended questions, beginning with like how and what. What have I done to make you so angry? How can I fix this problem to your satisfaction? Reflecting a feeling, sound like you are really annoyed, upset, angry. This is frustrating for you and apologize for the delay. Clarifying and summarizing the issue. Now, the anger is an emotion that can escalate leaving hurt feelings, resulting in more anger and conflict, ending with no solution or resolution, and lead to the grievances. So this is very common. That in most of the cases we see that the anger is an emotion which is created due to some differences, and then it is further escalated with the attitudes of both the sides. This is a very interesting diagram that how this escalation takes place in the anger and the emotions of anger. For example, it starts with the personal arguments, reason, interrupts, defends, make excuses, and then it is further, then person argues, reasons, defends, and argues, reasons, defends, and gradually this is taken off and off and off, and it ultimately become a high level of escalation. Now, the some type of behaviors which certainly aids like a fuel to the fire in escalating the conflicts. For example, insulting the people by calling their names, yelling and screaming at others, aggressive stances, leaving abruptly, leering and other facial expressions, pointing a finger, closing in a personal space, hand gestures, excuses, verbal pokers. Uh, Verbal poker is a very dangerous and highly negative thing, and that is the normally when people speak and we cannot tolerate them, we try to interrupt and we poke into their words, and this really creates further frustration in the parties. making a fist or shaking a fist, pranks, hazing, passive aggressive silence, arguing who is right or wrong, interrupting. So these are some of the very common attitudes or actions which would and behaviors which would definitely increase the level of escalation of the conflicts. Now, to de-escalate this, the conflicts and the feelings of conflicts are the behaviors we can uh, allow the verbal releases. People should be allowed to speak out their anger, their discomfort, their kind of dissatisfaction, listening and responding calmly. Don't rebut and don't, we already discussed that, don't try to deny and rebut the people, not interrupting or making excuses, and keeping cool under fire. So you have to be, and mostly for the leadership roles, it's very important to be cool and not responding negatively. The emotions and logic are like oil and water. Feeling must be deal with uh, active listening paramounts before logic can be heard. So it means that the feeling must be dealt with active listening and logic. Now, in the projects, we can see a number of conflicts, and the sources of these conflicts mainly come from the schedule, from the priorities, from the human resource deployment, technical issues, the non-human side of the projects, administrative procedure, caste, personality, and many more things. And the severity or the intensity of the various types of conflicts in the projects also vary from different phase of the projects to from one to the other, and we will see the next diagram. This we discussed last time also, that if you just look at the intensity of conflicts, it changes from phase to phase of the project, and in the formation stage, we normally see that the project priorities are the biggest source of conflicts, and that is followed by the schedule and maybe toward SOPs and procedures. But when we go to the planning phase, planning initiation phase, we see that again the priorities and schedule and the procedures. And when we enter into the execution phase, which is a lot of activities are then taken off in the project, and we have a very competition amongst the resources, both the human and non-human. So in such conditions, we can see that the highest conflict is the time, and followed by the cost, maybe technical priorities and technical resources. And when we go to the last stage, that is again the closing stage, or nearly the completion of projects, we again have the major conflict coming from the time, and then that is followed by the manpower issues for the skilled labors particularly. So the nature of the conflicts and their intensity changes from different project phase to other phases, and so there might be the group differences towards the goal and expectations. There might be uncertainty about authority. There might be interpersonal conflicts between parties at interest. For example, they may differ in the objective, technical judgment, cost and reward, schedules, priorities, project managers versus functional manager issues, technical administrative procedures, uncertainty about authority, resource allocation, communication, technological choices, clash of personalities, senior management, project manager, and functional manager conflicts, stringent cost and time related conflicts, project's priority, applicability of technology, client's priority and schedule, sponsors related issues, and so on. Now, in the project formation, we discussed that the four major issues which come from the technical objectives of the project. In the formation stage, we are not very much clear about the technical outcomes, and the objectives are not very smart, specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time bound. Therefore, there is always a dispute among the different organs about the priorities of the project. The second is commitment of resources, forthcoming resources, that we need a lot of new resources in shape of human and non-human resources. And once the project is being approved, the commitment from different departments becomes really a problem. Set priority of the project. There are a number of projects we have in the pipeline, and every department would like to have more importance to their project. Certainly, in this context, the project priority becomes really a big conflict. And then finally, the organizational structure, because the project team would like to have more powers, more authority, and they may work like their own self-empowered team. But the land managers and the functional managers would like to take more powers of the decision in the project, and this conflict ultimately impact the organizational structures also. When we go to the build-up stage, that is the planning initiation stage, and now we have decided the project's priority have been certainly defined. The structures are also to some extent defined. Then again, we have the priorities, schedule, administrative procedures, from general concept to the detailed plans. So we have a strong matrix. Project management seeks commitment of people from functional department. Weak matrix in which the prime project manager seeks commitment of work, conflict with technical issues, technical expert versus generalist. So we have a lot of conflicts coming from the generalist kind of observations in the projects. When we go to the main program or execution of the projects, again, we have the schedule conflicts at the top, and then that is followed by delays, catching to require extra resources, difficult to trace and estimate the impact of delays, manage time, cost, performance trade-offs, trade-off constrained by contract, company policy, and ethical considerations. So these are some of the issues which we normally face in the project build, a main program or execution stage. And when we go to the phase out or closing stage, we again have the biggest conflict coming from the time of the project, our schedule, and then we have the schedule slippages, the extension of the project becomes an issue, then deadlines are not fulfilled, and we have again the problems of functional versus project managers. Tolerate moderate cost overrun. There is a cost overrun and time overrun, and we try to negotiate and trade off between trade cost and quality. And then there are some technical problems, but they are very rare because now we are at the closing stage, and most of the technical modalities have already been resolved. Now, this is very interesting figure, which tells us the various modes of conflict handling. And there are two dimensions of this conflict handling matrix. The one is the cooperativeness between the two parties. And that is certainly how the two parties are forthcoming to solve the problems. And definitely more the cooperation between the two parties would lead to more amicable solution of the conflict. On the vertical axis, we have the assertiveness, that how both the parties have very strong assertiveness on their viewpoint of their stance, and how they are having a stand of their stance. So if we have a very high level of assertiveness, we see that in this particular case, we have a highly competing situation in which the parties to the conflict are highly competing. And in this kind of situation, normally to find a solution really becomes very difficult, because both the parties are having highly competing and highly assertive kind of situation. And none of the two parties show any kind of cooperativeness. And then this is the most difficult part of the conflict resolution. If we go on the horizontal axis, we see that a high level of cooperativeness would lead to accommodating each other and trying to resolve the problem. In this kind of situation, we can even see that it's very easy to deal with the conflict if the parties are ready to cooperate with each other, and this kind of conflicts are resolved amicably and very soon. If we go to the left, we see that if there is very low level of cooperation and assertiveness, which means that both the parties are neither cooperating, but still they are not very adamant on their stand. So this is kind of avoiding in which both the parties are trying to avoid the conflict one way or the other way. Similarly, if we go for the very high level of cooperation and high level of assertiveness, this is collaboration. Though both the parties are having high assertiveness, but at the same time they are ready to cooperate to solve the problem. This is a bit better than competing, but still the assertiveness of both the parties are very high, and it is really not very easy to find some solution in this kind of conflict. The most uh, amicable solution, amicable situation is when both the assertiveness and the cooperation is there, but not very high, and both the parties are ready to accommodate each other and give and take solution. And this kind of situation really create a win-win solution for the project parties to the conflict. Now, if we go to the competing kind of situation, I have already discussed that there is a fighting kind of situation in which none of the two parties are ready to come down of their principal stand, and both they are non-cooperative and assertive, and every party, both the party would pursue their own personal interest. This is power-oriented mode in which one uses whatever power seems appropriate to win one's own position, standing up for your rights, defending a position when you believe is correct, or simply trying to win. This kind of situation is normally adopted by the two parties, where both the parties believe that they have a very strong, strong evidence for their support, and ultimately they would be winning if the conflict is going to any kind of arbitration or litigation. The competing kind of the fighting kind of conflict is normally resolved to the court and arbitration, because the amicable solution is normally not possible for this kind of situation. The other we discussed that if the cooperation is very high, but the assertiveness is not very low, this is a situation where both the parties are cooperative and accommodative, and this is just the opposite to the competing. And when this kind of situation occurs, certainly both the parties try to self-sacrifice and to surrender some of their interest in the best interest of solution. And normally I have already submitted that it's very easier normally to create solution in this kind of conflicts. The third is when we have neither the cooperativeness nor assertiveness, both the parties are flight-like situation. Neither they are coming to the to set together to solve the problem, but still at the same time they are not try to create any problem in the project. So this kind of situation is also good in the sense that it does not impact the project objectives, but at the same time it's very important because at the end of the day the project is affected. But certainly it's good in the sense that the disputing party that do not pursue their objectives, and they does not address the conflict. Avoiding might take the form of diplomatically sidestepping an issue, postponing an issue until better time, or simply withdrawing. So normally in the projects we set aside this kind of issues for some other time, and we say that okay, let us we make a committee, and the committee would like to see the merit of this issue, but we would not stop the work, and the work will be continued with the same kind of spirit. The collaboration mode is the mode where we have both the high level of cooperativeness and high level of assertiveness. Again, this is rather a bit difficult, though the people are not avoiding, they are ready to solve the problem, but both of them are very assertive on their positions. So it's an attempt to work with the other person to find some solution which fully satisfies the concern of both the parties. So in this context, it's really very difficult because both the parties would have their own concern, and it would be difficult to find a solution which can satisfy all of their concerns. It means digging into an issue to identify the underlying concern of the two individuals and to find an alternative which meets both sets of concern. Collaborating between two parties might take the form of exploring a disagreement to learn from each other's insights, concluding to resolve some conditions which would otherwise have them competing for the resources, or confronting and trying to find a creative solution to the interpersonal problems. Finally, the most common situation is where both the parties have surrendered their assertiveness and also improved their cooperativeness, and they are ready to sit on the dialogue table and make some give and take solutions. So this is as a mutually acceptable solution which can partially satisfy both the parties. So it is we surrender some of the interest and we try to win our interest. It falls on middle grounds between competing and accommodating. Compromising gives more than competing but less than accommodating. So this is very important. And likewise, it addresses an issue more directly than avoiding, but does not explore it much depth in collaborating. Compromising might mean splitting the differences, exchanging the concessions of seeking a quick middle ground position, and that is where both the parties would definitely negotiate with their interest and find out a place or a point which is both acceptable to both the parties. So in case of the conflict and behavior, there is no universal right answer. All five modes are useful in some situation. Each represent a set of useful social skills. Our conventional wisdom recognizes, for example, that often two heads are better than one, that is collaborating. But it also says that kill your enemies with kindness, that is accommodating. Split the differences is a compromise. Leave well enough alone is avoiding, and might makes the right is competing. So the effectiveness of a given conflict handling mode depends upon the requirements of the specific conflict situation and the skill with which the mode is used, and we will discuss. This has been taken from the Thomas Kuhlman conflict mode instruments. Now, when we try to resolve the conflicts, please remember that we are not trying to establish who is right or who is wrong. Rather, we want to create a solution to the conflict. So please, when you try to solve a problem, you most of the time don't have your personal biases. You have to avoid your personal liking and disliking, and you don't want to become a party of the conflict. So you try to solve the problem instead of fixing the responsibility for the problem. Now, the interest-based problem solving is that we will discuss, not debate. We will create options, not concede. So any effort to locate mutually acceptable solution to the controversy is a dual concern model. And this is just very important slide which tells you that 5 minutes of remembered anger can suppress the immune system for up to 6 hours. So this is very important that we are dealing with the conflicts. We have to be very emotionally stable, and we have to be avoiding the anger so that we cannot damage our immune system. And that you can see for a 5 minutes of anger, which you could not forget, which in other words leaves a psychological impact on your psyche or on your emotions, can definitely then depress and retard your body immune system. Now, in the project management, the nature of project conflict and the precise design of the deliverables and how design is to be achieved by whom, when, and at what cost. So this is very important. And the three requirements of the conflict resolution are: allow conflicts to be resolved without irreparable harm to the project objective. So this must be very important, that the objectives of the projects must not be suffered through any project resolution process. Number two, allow and foster honesty between negotiators. So when you are trying to resolve the issue, try to be honest, to be friendly, and to be acceptable. Solution must satisfy not only individual needs, but also affected other parties involved. So it's not always the case that you solve the problems between the two. At the same time, you may affect the interest of a third party, and you have to be very careful about that. Now, the principled negotiation in which we try to create a win-win situation, the first principle is that separate people from the problem. So please don't include your personal matters, like, for example, if you don't like a person, if a person is from your hometown and you like him, if a person is not having some good previous record and you have a bias towards him, so please don't have this kind of feelings. And then second is to focus on interest, not position. You should not be convinced, and you should not be impressed by the position of people, whether their legal position, political positions, or their monetary positions. Rather, you have to be very careful about the interest of the people to solve the problem. If we're trying to reach agreement and vent options for mutual gain, so creative options, a middle road to solve the problem will be required to resolve the conflicts. Insist on using objective criteria, that is to find the standards such as market value, law, company policy, to determine the contract provisions, the good practices, and any other kind of legal document which can help. So the negotiation is basically a process in which the parties to the conflicts can come together to create an agreement to solve the problem. And definitely, if there is no agreement on resolving the problem or conflict, there cannot be a negotiation. The first step to the negotiation is that there is a will in the two parties to solve the problem. If you just see that A and B are two parties, they are trying to be closer to each other, and if this is not possible, this is not done, and if the parties don't have this will to solve the problem, then definitely it would be next to impossible to solve the problem. So negotiation is basically a process which involves two or more parties considering alternatives, arrive at a mutually agreeable solution, and reach mutually satisfactory objectives. So the objectives of negotiation, that the interest of the parties must be satisfied, there must be an ongoing relationship, their relationship is preserved, the two parties do not leave behind potential gains. The integrative negotiation create an open and trusting climate. Focus on interest, not positions. Again, separate the issue from the person. Be aware of the first offer, because the first offer is normally, you have to work on that. You have to work on different position and different offers, different level of offers for negotiation, and try to package the trade-off issues. Search for novel and creative solution and search for objective criteria. The process of give and take in bargaining, not good for or bad, process skill that can be learned more than good interpersonal skill. So the negotiation skills are really very important for the project managers. Many negotiations to avoid conflict, negotiation is about power, not most powerful always can control yourself and actions. So when we are trying to resolve the conflicts through negotiation, there are a few very important steps. The first is that you have to be prepared to work on your goals and the bottom line beyond which you would not like to go. Reflect before you start. You try to sit with your team, your seniors, and try to reflect on the issues and the possible scenarios which can solve the problem, and develop a written plan and get and will give. What will you get and what you will give? So the position should be very clear in terms of your uh, what you try to surrender and what you try to get out of the negotiation. So for an effective negotiator, it's important to be a good listener. What really want and willing to concede, silence is powerful, flexibility must be able to negotiate terms, and creativity. So these are some of the very common kind of things which the negotiator must have. The last few slides that if you are going for a negotiation, uh, you should identify that what you want and what you don't, what you would like to surrender and what you would like to achieve of the negotiation. But to know what are your counterpart wants, what are their wants or what are their demands. Number three, know what you are willing to give up. What are the different kinds of surrenders which you would like to do in the negotiation process? And then what are the various alternatives, 1, 2, 3, 4, or different kind of scenarios? And then know your counterpart in subject matter. That what is the strength and weakness of your counterpart, and what is strength in terms of knowledge, in terms of experience. And finally, you rehearse, and rehearse. That you set with your project team to try to see that how the negotiation can be usefully done to create, a principled solution. So substantial, that you prepare, you probe, and you propose. You prepare yourself. We have been given the 6 steps. You probe the possible alternatives and solutions, and you try to propose these solutions in different scenarios. So for preparation, certainly networking with the project team, the usual style of the counterpart, do not assume anything, seek to understand before you seek to be understood, Covey. And the less you say, more you focus on the other words. So I think we have already discussed these forming, the team building stages, the forming, the storming, the norming, the performing, and the adjourning. And the effective team management we discussed last day, that there are some, for example, some of the barriers like different priorities and interests, role conflicts, competition over team leadership, lack of team definitions and structures. And the last word, which I would like to share with the students and the youth of Pakistan and other, even the entire world, that we at the moment are passing through one of the most serious crises of the human history, at least the living memory we have in the last 100 years or more. We don't have this kind of pandemic. I think the Spanish flu, which was in 1990 or 18 and 90, was this kind of the pandemic, which created a lot of infections and fatalities in the Europe. But again, this was very much restricted to the Europe, and the rest of the world was not affected by it. But unfortunately today, due to the globalization and very easy movement of the people from one part of the world to the other part, the infections and the COVID-19 is traveling much faster. And that's why this epidemic, which started in Wuhan in December 2019, is spread it now to the entire world, and almost all the 206 or 210 countries of the world are now victim of this COVID-19. We are in the lockdown conditions, I think, since last almost 1.5 months now. And I remember that we had this lockdown starting in Gilgit-Baltistan from 15th of March. So in that context, we are now almost 1.5 months in this lockdown situation, which is definitely creating a lot of frustration and a lot of disappointments, and particularly the people who are daily wagers, who are not having their businesses now, are highly frustrated because of the non-availability of resources with them. So in these contexts, I believe that what we need to do is that we must first of all do all the precautionary measures which has been proposed by the WHO, and this is again the spirit of Islamic teachings also, that you have to be very careful about the preventive measures about the disease and the pandemics. All the preventive measures like use of masks, hand hygienes, frequent washing of your hand with soap, detergents, and use of sanitizers, use of proper physical distancing while traveling, while working. These are some of the fundamental principles of the health safety. And once this is done, then the next is to trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that He is the creator of all these pandemics and diseases. And وَإِذَا مَرِضْتُ فَهُوَ يَشْفِينِ. And when I'm ill, that is only the Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the God who will cure me and who will emancipate us from this pandemic. So this is your very strong trust in Allah and your stark resilience against the infection. And the second is that we should always try to self-accountability to see that we try to learn from our mistakes. We try to resort to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and particularly in these very holy days of the Ramadan, we have enough time to offer the supplications, because this social distancing and this physical distancing rather, and this lockdown has given us a lot of time to reflect upon ourselves and to see that what can we improve in our conduct and what has been the mistakes we've been doing. And we resort to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and solicit His astaghfar and His blessings. And the third is that we try to create the courage, we try to encourage our people, our families, we try to help the people to fight against the COVID-19. We help our family and friends who are depressing, who are becoming psychologically isolated. So we try to help them and to try to save them. And finally, that we believe that Pakistan would emerge as a great nation out of this crisis. A lot of good things are also coming from this crisis, and inshallah, the government and the civil society and everybody is working against, and this is definitely giving us a bigger opportunity to learn and to trust that we can do a better in a better way as a nation. Thank you very much. And at the end, once again, I pray that may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless us with His omniprotection and with His emancipation from all kind of pandemics, all kind of epidemics, diseases, now and even afterward. And we are blessed with good health in Iman. Thank you very much, and Jazakallah khair. It was really very wonderful to have this very important lecture.